I want you to imagine, just for a second, a vast, completely neutral ocean.
Okay.
But instead of water, right, this ocean is made entirely of raw, unadulterated power.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it stretches out endlessly in every direction. It's impossibly deep, churning with energy. And here's the kicker, the part that fundamentally challenges everything we are traditionally taught.
Which is?
This ocean doesn't care about you.
Right.
It doesn't care about concepts of good or evil. It doesn't possess any kind of moral compass at all.
It's just there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is simply a blind, waiting force of nature suspended in the dark. And the only thing it responds to, the only thing that creates ripples or waves or currents in this immense expanse is human will.
You know, it forces a staggering shift in perspective when you really sit with that image.
It really does.
Because, I mean, we rely so heavily on comforting narratives about the universe. We tend to view reality as having, well, an inherent moral arc.
Right, like some sort of built-in sense of cosmic justice.
Exactly. Or, conversely, some intrinsic malevolence, like the universe is out to get us.
Yeah, totally.
So to strip all of that away, to picture the universe as nothing more than a neutral reservoir of energy that we are entirely responsible for shaping, it removes a lot of the psychological safety nets people use to navigate their lives.
That removal of safety nets and the profound responsibility that replaces them is basically the core of what we are unpacking today.
Yes, it is.
So, welcome to the deep dive. For this conversation, we are looking at a stack of sources centered around a highly visual, utterly fascinating manual. It's titled Kindoki, A Manual of African Witchcraft and Brujería.
And we should establish right off the bat the kind of text we are dealing with here, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you listening to this might assume we are analyzing like a standard academic textbook.
Right, like an anthropological study or something.
Exactly. Perhaps a dry overview written by an outside observer who visited a community for a few months. But that is not the case here.
Not at all.
This is a highly practical, incredibly atmospheric guide that operates from deep within the worldview it describes.
Yeah.
It makes no apologies and offers, well, no academic distance. It presents its reality as absolute fact.
And just looking at the physical cover art we have in front of us, it is striking.
Very.
I mean, it immediately confronts you. You have these stark, blood-red letters spelling out Kindoki.
Yes.
And right below that, occupying the center of the cover, there is this visceral, almost aggressive imagery.
The cauldron.
Yeah, a heavy iron cauldron resting dead center on a pentagram. Inside the cauldron sits a human skull. And rising straight out of the top of the skull is a three-pronged trident.
It's intense.
It really is. And the background is pitch dark, filled with floating esoteric symbols, jagged lightning bolts, spirals, arrows pointing in opposing directions.
Right.
I mean, it genuinely looks like a prop you would find hidden in a dusty chest in a Hollywood horror film.
Which is actually the primary trap of looking at material like this.
Oh, totally.
It is incredibly easy to look at that cover, the cauldron, the skull, the pentagram, and immediately filter it through a century of cinema.
Right, pop culture caricatures.
Exactly. Our minds are conditioned to jump straight to horror movies, to ideas of wicked witches and demonic pacts.
Right.
But our goal today is to completely bypass those superficial, culturally conditioned interpretations.
Because we are leaving the cinematic tropes at the door. If you get hung up on the skull, you miss the entire philosophical engine driving the practice.
Precisely. The foundational layer of this material is about perception and the mechanics of belief.
Yeah.
We are going to explore the profound philosophical worldview that underpins these practices. We'll delve into the historical treatise, which is a very specific, politically charged word used in the text.
A fascinating word choice, yeah.
Treaties that formed these traditions across continents, and we will examine the actual mechanics of it.
Right, how it actually works.
How a practitioner goes about constructing physical, tangible objects to channel invisible environmental forces.
So let's start right where the manual starts, with that very first concept of the ocean we talked about.
The neutral ocean.
Right. The text lays out a central thesis on magic that completely upends, the conventional understanding of the topic.
It really does.
It explicitly states that the tools of the magical trade, the cauldrons, the bones, the herbs, the iron tridents are, and I'm quoting directly here, merely props used to channel that power.
And in the context of global magical or religious traditions, declaring the sacred objects to be merely props is a revolutionary statement.
It is.
It strips the object of its inherent divinity.
Yeah, and it goes further, stating that the elements of nature are closely connected to that immense ocean of power. but that the power is manipulated for good or evil according to the will of the sorcerer.
Right.
So the magic isn't in the wand. It's not radiating from the cauldron. It resides entirely in the person wielding them.
It democratizes the practice while simultaneously placing a crushing burden on the practitioner.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
If the tools are just props, they have no intrinsic moral alignment. The skull on the cover isn't evil.
Right.
The cauldron isn't dark. They are inert physical materials.
I kept thinking of it like a magnifying glass focusing the sun's rays.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Thanks. Like if you hold a magnifying glass over a pile of dry leaves on a sunny day, you could start a fire.
Sure.
But the magnifying glass itself isn't the fire. It doesn't contain heat. It is just a curved piece of glass.
Right.
The sun is the actual power source that represents our vast ocean of neutral ambient energy. The human hand holding the glass, angling it just right, deciding exactly where the focal point lands to ignite the leaf.
Yeah.
That is the human will.
Exactly. And a magnifying glass doesn't care if you are using it to start a campfire, to keep your family warm through a freezing night,
Or if you're using it to burn down your neighbor's house.
Right. The glass just focuses the light. The morality is entirely supplied by the user.
Yeah.
The text is demanding that the practitioner take absolute ownership of their intentions.
Which is heavy. But I struggle a bit with the idea that the magic itself is entirely neutral, though.
How so?
Well, it strips away the traditional binary we are so used to, right?
Yeah.
White magic is healing and black magic is cursing.
Yes, it discards that entirely.
This text seems to be arguing that magic is just physics. Spiritual physics, but physics nonetheless. But surely a skull or a coffin brings a certain energetic baggage to the table.
See, you are touching on the difference between cultural semiotics and inherent energy.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, in Western, largely Christian-influenced societies, a skull represents death, decay, and fear.
Right, danger.
Yes. But in the Congo worldview, which heavily influences Kindoki, the bones of the dead represent ancestral presence.
Oh, wow.
They represent wisdom and the grounding foundation of the family line. So the baggage you feel is your cultural conditioning reacting to the prop.
That makes so much sense.
The text is asking the practitioner to look past their conditioning and see the skull as a structural component, like a dense, mineral-rich anchor to the spiritual realm.
So it takes away the scapegoat. You can't blame the tool.
You cannot say, the devil made me do it. And conversely, you cannot say, the sacred relic healed them.
Right.
You have to say, I channeled the natural environment to achieve this specific outcome.
I did this.
Exactly. And looking at the imagery associated with this section in the manual, there is a photograph of an altar.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
It is not elaborate in that Hollywood sense at all, is it?
Not at all.
Right.
It features some white candles, a few plain glass jars, some small statues, like one looks like a clear molded plastic figure of a saint or a spirit, and a simple glass of clear liquid, probably water or rum.
Right. It looks incredibly mundane.
Yeah, if you took those exact items and scattered them randomly around a standard kitchen,
Right.
you wouldn't even notice them. They are literally everyday objects.
And that's the point. The text refers to the elements of nature as material manifestations. This altar, these jars and candles, they act as the interface. Think of them as the physical keyboard and monitor that allow the human mind to interact with the unseen software of that neutral ocean of power.
Oh, I like the tech analogy.
They give the human mind something to latch onto, a physical focal point to direct the will so it doesn't just dissipate into daydreaming.
Because if the morality doesn't lie in the universe, it lies entirely in the will of the sorcerer.
Precisely.
That has massive implications for how we operate in our normal non-magical lives, too.
How do you mean?
Well, it makes you think about how we interact with the complex tools we've built today. We constantly assign moral intent to our technology.
Oh, absolutely.
We blame social media algorithms for making society angry or isolated. We debate whether artificial intelligence is inherently good or evil.
Because we project our own unresolved moral ambiguities onto our creations.
Yes.
Much like the cauldrons and candles of the practitioner, our servers, our smartphones, and our lines of code are just material manifestations. They are highly complex props channeling the immense power of global information. They reflect the will of the people who program them and the people who use them.
So acknowledging that the tool is neutral forces you to look in the mirror.
Exactly, and ask, what is my will? What am I actually trying to manifest when I open this app?
Wow. Yeah, so if you accept that the universe is this blind, neutral ocean, and you are the one holding the magnifying glass, The next logical hurdle is figuring out how to actually see what you are doing.
Right.
How do you aim the glass if you can't see the light?
You have to change how you see.
The manual addresses this by presenting a massive psychological hurdle, focusing heavily on what it calls looking beyond the known.
Yes, the psychological demands of the practice come into sharp focus here.
Yeah.
Because it is one thing to theoretically understand that the universe is neutral energy. It is an entirely different process to rewire your brain to actually perceive it.
And the artwork paired with this concept in the manual is arresting.
It really stands out.
It's a stark, high-contrast black and white image showing a ghostly, shrouded figure.
Right.
The fabric is draped over something unseen. But the face, formed by the negative space, the shadows, and the folds, resembles a distorted, elongated skull.
It's brilliant.
It's haunting, yeah. But it beautifully captures the idea of lifting the veil between our mundane, everyday reality and a hidden underlying realm.
It serves as a visual representation of cognitive dissonance.
How so?
Well, the face is clearly there, but it is constructed entirely of negative space and draped cloth. Your brain has to actively work to assemble the image.
Oh, I see.
You have to consciously adjust your vision to see the pattern hidden in the chaos.
So to access that ocean of power, the practitioner have to fundamentally change how they process sensory input.
Exactly.
They can't just, memorize a chant in Latin and wave a stick.
No, the text is adamant that witchcraft in this tradition is not a recipe book.
Right.
It is a total cognitive shift. You are not learning to do magic. You are learning to see the world in a way that makes magic possible.
I kept imagining it like putting on a pair of highly specialized glasses.
Okay, tell me more.
Say you are walking through a dense forest, right? A forest you have walked through 100 times. You know every tree.
Sure.
Then you put on glasses that allow you to see the ultraviolet and infrared spectrums of light.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, the flowers have intricate, glowing patterns you couldn't see before. You can see the heat signatures of animals hiding deep in the brush. You can see the trails of insects across the leaves.
Right.
The forest itself didn't change one bit, but your perception of it did. Suddenly, an everyday environment is alive with hidden forces, currents, and connections.
That's a fantastic way to frame it. Looking beyond the known means learning to perceive that ultraviolet spectrum of spiritual reality.
Yeah.
It is recognizing that the material world is just the outermost skin of a much deeper, more complex system of interacting energies.
But I have to push back here a little, because this is where the line between mysticism and madness gets blurry for me.
Okay, fair point.
If you are deliberately trying to alter your perception to see hidden forces, how does a practitioner differentiate between truly seeing beyond and simply getting lost in their own imagination?
Right, the danger of delusion.
Exactly. If I stare into a dark room and try hard enough to see a monster, my brain's pattern recognition will eventually supply one.
Pareidolia.
Yeah, pareidolia. So how is this shifting worldview any different from intentionally inducing a hallucination?
That is the central epistemological crisis of any esoteric practice, honestly.
Yeah.
How do you know what is real when you are actively trying to bypass your standard sensory filters?
Right. How do you ground it?
The manual addresses this through the concept of worldview.
Oh.
It's crucial to understand that it is not advocating for isolated, random hallucinations.
Okay.
It is advocating for adopting a specific structural framework for interpreting reality.
A framework.
Yes. To look beyond the known requires abandoning the rigid, purely materialist logic we are taught from birth, but replacing it with a different kind of logic. A logic where the material and the spiritual are deeply causally intertwined.
So it's not about just making things up out of thin air, but changing the foundational rules of how you analyze the data you are already receiving.
Exactly. Consider how we interpret natural events.
Right.
In a purely material worldview, if a sudden violent storm blows the roof off your house, it is interpreted as a meteorological anomaly.
Right, a confluence of low pressure and temperature differentials. Random bad luck.
Right. But in the worldview described by Kindoki, that storm is not random.
What is it then?
It might be a manifestation of unseen forces,
Yeah.
perhaps directed by a hostile will, or perhaps a violent reaction to a deep energetic imbalance in the local environment.
Oh, wow.
The practitioner learns to read the landscape, both the physical weather and the spiritual climate, as a single unified system.
Even so, how do they keep from becoming completely untethered? I mean, if every gust of wind is a spirit, you'd become paralyzed by paranoia.
And that is precisely why these practices are deeply rooted in tradition and lineage, rather than just individual experimentation.
The tradition acts as an anchor.
Exactly. The props, the rituals, and the shared communal knowledge act as anchoring points. They provide structure and boundaries to the altered perception.
I see.
A hallucination is solitary and erratic, but a worldview is structural, communal, and, within its own parameters, predictive.
It's an exercise in extreme critical thinking, really, even if you are listening to this as a hard-nosed skeptic who views the supernatural as pure psychology.
Absolutely.
The mechanics of looking beyond the known are identical to the mechanics of radical innovation in any field.
Major paradigm shifts in human history always required this exact cognitive leap.
Like, think about it, before the germ theory of disease was established, the most brilliant doctors in the world thought illness was caused by bad air miasma.
Or imbalances in bodily humor.
Right. Someone had to look beyond the accepted rigid logic of their day. They had to imagine a microscopic reality teeming with invisible entities that they couldn't even see yet.
They had to put on the glasses.
Yes. They had to mentally put on those ultraviolet glasses to even conceive of the concept of bacteria and viruses before the microscopes were powerful enough to prove it.
Or consider the shift in physics at the turn of the 20th century.
Okay.
Albert Einstein had to look beyond the rigid, deeply established Newtonian physics of his time to conceive of relativity.
Wow, yeah.
He had to imagine time and space not as a fixed grid, but as a flexible fabric that could bend and warp.
Right.
A paradigm shift requires you to temporarily suspend your disbelief in the impossible so you can discover the actual boundaries of the possible.
That's beautifully said.
Whether you are operating in theoretical physics, global business, contemporary art, or personal psychological growth, if you only ever operate within the safe confines of the established known, you will only ever replicate the results everyone else is already getting.
Changing your worldview is the absolute prerequisite for accessing new forms of power.
Yep.
But you brought up lineage and tradition acting as an anchor earlier, which naturally leads into the historical reality of how these specific worldviews were actually formed.
This is a crucial transition.
Yeah, we move from the internal psychological shift of a single practitioner to the massive, centuries-long historical shifts of entire cultures.
We have to introduce the concept of syncretism here.
Okay.
It is absolutely vital to understanding how these African and indigenous practices evolved in the Americas.
The manual presents an incredible historical revelation regarding this evolution. It explains how innovation in these magical practices was achieved under the most horrific circumstances imaginable.
It's a dark but powerful history.
And the phrasing it uses is so loaded. It states that innovation was done through treaties with the spirits to establish new traditions.
The word treaties is a brilliant, highly diplomatic term.
Yeah.
It implies negotiation, mutual benefit, and a formal agreement between sovereign powers.
The text specifically highlights the blending of Lukumi traditions, which have Yoruba origins from West Africa, and Tano traditions, which belong to the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean.
Right.
It notes that blending these two deeply distinct, geographically separated traditions is seen as completely acceptable in the Congo worldview.
We have to ground this in the brutal historical context of the transatlantic slave trade and European colonization.
We absolutely do.
You had millions of African peoples from various distinct, highly sophisticated cultures and spiritual backgrounds, the Yoruba, the Congo, the Fawn, and others.
Yeah.
They were violently uprooted and forced into chattel slavery in the Caribbean and the Americas.
Right.
And there, they were pushed alongside the surviving indigenous Taino populations who had just suffered their own catastrophic demographic collapse due to European disease and violence.
So it wasn't some polite cultural exchange.
Not all.
It was a catastrophic, violent collision of worlds where mere survival was the only objective.
Unimaginably catastrophic. Under those conditions of extreme oppression, survival was not just physical, it was deeply spiritual.
Right.
Their traditional power structures were destroyed. Their physical temples were thousands of miles away.
Gone.
The geographical landmarks, like the specific rivers or mountains where certain spirits resided, were gone.
Yeah.
They had to adapt their entire spiritual technology to a foreign landscape while under the constant watch of hostile overseers.
Wow.
And the Congo worldview, as noted in the text, provided a unique philosophical framework for this adaptation. It allowed these different groups to essentially evaluate each other's spiritual technologies and realize that isolation meant death.
They had to merge.
They had to merge their understanding of that vast ocean of power.
I instantly compared these treaties with spirits to, like, A hostile corporate merger, or maybe more accurately, intense diplomatic alliances formed during a chaotic world war.
That's a very apt way to look at it.
You have two different nations, each with their own generals, their own specific communication protocols, their own dwindling resources.
Right.
They don't have the luxury of conquering each other. They have to sit down at the table and negotiate a shared, functional reality.
Exactly.
The Yoruba practitioner and the Taino practitioner look at each other and say, okay, your understanding of the forest spirits and our understanding of the ancestral dead need to integrate right now if our people are going to survive this plantation.
That is spiritual diplomacy in action. When these vastly different cultures collided in the Americas, they didn't just clash, they negotiated complex theological integrations.
Right.
The text explicitly mentions that the founders of the Palo tradition drew immense strength from these established treaties. They recognized that the spirits of the new land and the spirits of their homeland had to reach an accord.
But the manual also offers a sharp critique of how these traditions are practiced today, which I've found fascinating.
Oh, the critique of dogma.
Yes. It states that those original founders were a lot less dogmatic than the Paleros of the present day.
That's a very telling line.
Which brings up a universal problem.
Mm.
Why do belief systems inevitably calcify? I mean, if the entire foundation of your spiritual power was based on radical innovation, blending traditions, and negotiating new treaties to survive, why do modern practitioners lock it down into such strict, unforgiving dogma?
It is the tragic, seemingly inevitable life cycle of almost every revolutionary movement in human history.
Really?
Think about it. In the beginning, during the crucible of creation, when survival is on the line, flexibility is your greatest asset.
You have to be flexible.
You innovate because you have no other choice. The founders of these traditions were pragmatists. They were concerned with what worked, what healed the sick, what provided protection, what channeled the power effectively in their new, harsh reality.
But then the immediate existential crisis fades. Generations pass.
Time passes, yes.
Hmm.
And the radical innovations of the past slowly solidify into the unquestionable traditions of the present.
The treaty stops being a negotiation.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
stops being a living, breathing document and becomes a rigid set of unalterable laws. People start focusing obsessively on the exact shape of the prop, the precise angle of the skull, the exact type of iron in the cauldron, rather than focusing on the human will and the cognitive shift required to channel the power.
They forget the ocean.
They forget that the original treaty was forged by people brave enough to look beyond the known. Instead, they become bureaucrats, obsessed with policing the boundaries of what is known.
There is an image in the manual associated with this section that feels incredibly potent in this context.
The mask.
Yeah, the mask. It is an intricately carved wooden mask. It features intense, bared teeth and is covered in precise geometric patterns carved deep into the wood.
Right.
It doesn't look like a human face at all. It looks like the physical embodiment of a contract.
That's a great way to describe it.
It feels like a visual representation of these deep ancestral pacts.
And that mask is not intended to be a portrait of a person or even a specific spirit. It is an archive.
An archive, wow.
The geometric patterns likely hold specific translatable meanings, tracing the lineages, the agreements, and the specific terms of the spiritual treaties made centuries ago.
So it's readable.
Yes. When an educated practitioner looks at that mask, they are not just seeing a spooky wooden face. They are reading the diplomatic history of their tradition.
It really highlights the danger of dogma in any field.
Absolutely.
The original strength of these traditions was their incredible adaptability under pressure. When any practice, whether it is a spiritual religion, a political ideology, a scientific institution, or a corporate culture, forgets its foundational flexibility and becomes overly dogmatic, it loses its adaptive power.
It becomes brittle.
Exactly, becomes fragile.
It ceases to interact dynamically with the ocean of power because it is too busy polishing its historical props.
Yeah.
The manual is gently but firmly reminding the modern reader that accessing true power requires the same courage to negotiate new realities as their ancestors had.
Right.
You cannot just blindly copy the past. You have to understand the mechanics of how the past was built.
Which perfectly bridges us into the actual mechanics.
The engineering side.
Exactly. We understand the overarching philosophy. Neutral power, directed by human will. We understand the cognitive requirement, the psychological shift of looking beyond the known. We understand the historical context, spiritual treaties forged in the fire of survival.
Right.
So how does a practitioner actually do it today? How do you materialize this abstract philosophy into reality? That brings us to the core practical application, constructing a fetish.
This is where the metaphysical theory transforms into spiritual engineering.
And the visual evidence provided in the manual for this process is intense and highly detailed. Let's look at what we have here.
Okay.
First, there's a complex line drawing. It maps out a very elaborate, multi-tiered cross resting on a rectangular base.
Yes.
The entire structure is flanked by distinct drawings of coffins and surrounded by what look like stylized stars, or perhaps spark symbols denoting energy. Inside the main structure of the cross, there are little internal geometries, specific X's, dots, and hash marks mapped out like a grid.
It doesn't look like abstract art at all. It looks like an architectural blueprint or an electrical schematic.
Exactly. It isn't chaotic, spooky doodling designed to scare someone. It looks highly deliberate and mathematical.
Very precise.
Alongside that blueprint, there's a photograph of a corrugated metal fence, heavily painted with massive murals. You see skeletons, more large crosses, figures wearing top hats, and the letters RIP painted in bold block letters.
Right.
And finally, we have a photograph of the raw materials required for the construction. Piles of specific dried herbs and gnarled roots, thick dark glass bottles, and a simple unadorned white cup, all clustered together on the ground.
The transition from the abstract two-dimensional blueprint to the raw three-dimensional materials is the crux of the practice.
But before we break down those materials, I think we need to aggressively redefine the word fetish,
Oh, yes, absolutely.
because it carries a massive amount of modern cultural baggage. Most people hear that word and their minds immediately go to very weird, usually sexual or highly taboo places. We need to clear that up.
The modern psychological or colloquial use of the word fetish is a massive distortion of its original anthropological and spiritual meaning.
Where does it come from?
The word derives from the Portuguese festiço, which essentially means artificial or skillfully made.
Oh, interesting.
When European colonizers encountered African religious objects, they applied this term, largely misunderstanding the deep engineering behind them.
Right.
In the context of Kindoki, a fetish is absolutely not an object of psychological obsession.
It's functional.
It is a highly engineered, constructed object designed specifically to house, trap, or channel a specific spiritual force from the environment.
I was trying to come up with a modern mechanical analogy for this, and it hit me. Constructing a fetish is exactly like building a highly specific custom radio antenna.
A spiritual receiver and transmitter.
Yes. If you want to listen to a specific FM radio station, say 98.7, you need an antenna cut to the exact mathematical wavelength of that station's broadcast frequency. If your antenna is a little too long or a little too short, you don't get the music. You just get static. Or you accidentally tune into a completely different station.
Exactly.
Constructing a Kindoki fetish is like building an antenna meant to tune into a very exact spiritual frequency within that vast, chaotic ocean of power.
That is a perfect analogy, and it is precisely how the text treats the process. Let's look at the visual geometry you described, the blueprint of the cross, the coffins, the internal grid.
Yeah, what's going on there?
These aren't just there for a spooky, gothic aesthetic. They're the literal props mentioned in the very first chapter, but they must be arranged in precise mathematical schematics.
Okay.
The cross, for example, isn't necessarily just the Christian cross imported via colonization. In Congo traditions, the crossroads, the intersection of the vertical line representing the spirit realm and the horizontal line representing the material plane, is a fundamental cosmic map.
The axis of their universe.
Exactly. It is the exact intersecting point of the living and the dead.
That makes the coffins drawn on the blueprint make sense. And the skeletal imagery painted on the fence mural.
Right. These act as structural parameters. They act like grounding wires in an electrical circuit.
Wow.
They tell the ambient energy, this is the specific domain we are working within. We are pulling power from the ancestral realm. It is ritual functioning as a form of spiritual engineering. Every single ingredient serves a load-bearing purpose.
Break down the physical materials for me then. Why dark glass bottles? Why the specific herbs?
Think about it in terms of chemistry and physics. Why do we keep certain volatile chemicals in dark amber glass in a laboratory?
Because ambient ultraviolet light will degrade the compound.
Exactly. In this spiritual physics, the dark glass acts as an insulator. It protects a volatile spiritual compound inside from the ambient, chaotic, and mundane energies of the everyday world until the practitioner is ready to release it.
That is fascinating.
And the specific dried herbs and roots act like the copper wiring. Different plants have different energetic resonances, just like different metals conduct electricity differently.
So the practitioner is taking the abstract terms of the historical treaties we talked about earlier and fulfilling them in the physical world.
Yes.
The treaty essentially dictates, to call upon this specific defensive force, you need earth from a specific location, this particular conducting route, and this exact geometric symbol drawn on the ground.
Right.
You combine them in the white cup or seal them in the dark bottle, and you complete the circuit.
You are meticulously building the physical environment where the spirit can safely interface with material reality. And the stakes are high.
Because if you build the antenna wrong,
If you fail to build the antenna correctly, if you use the wrong herbs, or if you mess up the geometry of the cross, the signal won't come through. You just get spiritual static.
or worse,
Much worse. You might build an antenna that tunes into a chaotic, destructive frequency you weren't prepared to handle, and you have no way to turn it off.
that danger brings up a critical structural necessity, I think. You are building these highly complex spiritual antennas, you are honoring these ancient delicate treaties, and you are trying to pull raw power from this vast neutral ocean.
Right.
But you can't just plug a household toaster directly into a high-voltage municipal power line.
The toaster will explode.
Exactly. The toaster will explode. You need a transformer to step the voltage down. You need an intermediary.
Right.
You cannot just walk up to the raw, unbridled ocean of power without a gatekeeper.
Which brings us to perhaps the most important dynamic figure in these syncretic traditions, highlighted prominently as we move deeper into the manual.
Exu, the Lord of the Crossroads.
Yes, Exu is the linchpin. He is central to everything we have discussed so far. The perception, the treaties, the engineering.
The visual depiction of Exu provided in the source material is deeply striking, but again, not in a traditional Western sense.
It's very unique.
It is a photograph of a dark, somewhat rounded, almost conical physical form. It is not a highly detailed, anatomically correct human statue.
No, it's abstract.
It looks dense and heavy, embedded directly into this dark, earthy mass or cowrie shells, angled perfectly to form slanted, highly observant eyes and a horizontal, almost severe mouth.
Right.
And this entire form is resting in a wide bowl that is absolutely overflowing with offerings. I can see piles of coins, colorful beads, little metal trinkets, more cowrie shells, and maybe even some wrapped candies. It is dense with material accumulation.
That image beautifully encapsulates the ongoing, active, and demanding nature of the spiritual treaty.
Yeah.
Exu is not a distant, abstract deity sitting on a cloud passing passive judgment. He is right there, in the dirt, at the threshold of the door.
I likened Exu to a cosmic switchboard operator or like a universal middleman.
Oh, that's good.
If you have spent hours building your custom fetish antenna and you want your specific signal to go through to the right place in the spirit realm, or if you want to negotiate a brand new treaty to solve a modern problem, you have to go through Exu first.
Right, he routes the call.
Yeah, you have to pay the toll at the crossroads.
The concept of the crossroads is incredibly profound here. It is not just two dirt roads meeting. It is the ultimate cosmic intersection.
Wow.
It is where the physical meets the spiritual, where the past meets the future, and critically, where different choices branch off into unknown realities.
And Exu is the master of that.
Exu is the absolute master of that intersection.
Yeah.
He is the principle of communication, but also the principle of entropy and consequence.
Let's unpack the specific symbolism of his physical manifestation in that photograph. The cowrie shells used for the eyes and mouth.
In many African diasporic traditions, cowrie shells represent wealth, as they were historically used as actual currency.
Right.
But more importantly in this context, they represent sight, voice, and the memory of transaction.
The memory of transaction.
Yes. By embedding them as eyes and a mouth into the dark material of the fetish, the practitioner is giving Exu the physical means to witness the ritual and to speak for the practitioner in the spiritual realm.
That's brilliant.
They carry the energetic memory of human trade and value exchange, making them the perfect sensory organs for a spirit of negotiation.
And what about that massive bowl overflowing with coins and beads? I mean, it looks like a dragon's hoard.
It represents the continuous, ongoing exchange of energy. As we established, a treaty is not something you sign once, frame on the wall, and forget about.
It must be maintained.
The coins, the beads, the rum, the candies, these offerings are the energetic upkeep. You are paying the toll.
Right.
You are acknowledging the fundamental law of spiritual physics. To take power from the environment to manifest your will, You must give energy back to the system.
And Exu embodies that.
Exu embodies the very syncretism and adaptability we discussed earlier. He is the diplomat who opens the door so that Lukumi, Taino, and Congo energies can communicate without destroying each other.
It makes perfect sense. You can't have complex diplomacy without a highly skilled diplomat. Exu is the ultimate diplomat. But framing this concept of the crossroads around our everyday lives, it isn't just about literal dirt altars and cowrie shells, right?
Yeah, it's universal.
It is a profound metaphor for human decision-making.
Every single day we stand at a multitude of crossroads.
We all face these massive intersections in our lives where different paths, completely different consequences, and entirely different versions of ourselves meet.
Yes.
Choosing to take a risky new job, deciding to end a long-term relationship, packing up and moving to a new city. These are all crossroads.
Yeah, absolutely are.
And honoring the immense gravity of those choices, recognizing that a real toll must be paid in time, in emotional effort, in the painful act of letting go of the other options, is a universal human experience.
Exu reminds the practitioner, and the philosophy reminds us, that choices have tangible weight.
You can't just drift passively.
You cannot just drift passively through the intersection of your life. You must act with intent, pay the necessary price for your ambition, and acknowledge the complex forces at play. If you ignore the crossroads, if you refuse to pay the toll, or make a conscious, willful choice, the chaotic forces of the universe will eventually make the choice for you, and it will rarely be to your benefit.
Wow. Looking back at the incredible journey we've just taken through this manual, we started by aggressively stripping away everything we thought we knew about the morality of magic.
Imagining instead a vast, morally neutral ocean of power that only responds to the focus of human will.
We learned that the tools, no matter how intimidating they look, are merely props, placing the entire burden of moral responsibility squarely on our own shoulders.
We discovered that to even begin to access that power, we have to endure a massive cognitive shift.
Right, mentally putting on new glasses.
Looking beyond the known and unlearning the rigid materialist logic that keeps us trapped in a purely mundane view of reality.
We uncovered the hidden, brutal history of spiritual diplomacy, how the devastating collision of Lukumi, Tino, and Congo cultures resulted in vital treaties of survival, blending desperate traditions into new, innovative forms of power.
We examine the actual physical, spiritual engineering of it all, how a practitioner constructs a fetish, much like a custom radio antenna.
Yeah, using specific mathematical geometries and natural insulating elements to tune into exact frequencies.
And finally, we met Exu at the crossroads, the vital, demanding gatekeeper who facilitates the exchange, reminding us that every intersection of choice requires an offering, an intention, and an understanding of consequence.
It has been a wild, deeply philosophical ride that really challenges how we view our own agency.
It definitely does.
And I want to leave you, listening to this, with a specific concept to mull over as you go about your week. Think deeply about that critique in the text, the specific warning regarding the danger of dogma.
The sharp critique of those modern practitioners who forgot how to negotiate and simply polish the props of the past.
Yes, think about the treaties you have made in your own life.
The daily habits you've formed.
The emotional compromises you've accepted in your relationships or your career, the limiting beliefs you adopted just to survive a particularly difficult period in your past. Are you operating like the dogmatic practitioners of the present day, rigidly clinging to those old rules, routines, and defensive structures, even though they no longer serve your current reality?
Or can you find the courage to be like the original founders of these traditions? Flexible, pragmatic, willing to step up to the crossroads and negotiate a brand new treaty with your reality, and open always to looking beyond the known.